we definitely feel the impact of the lack of affordable housing or lack of rental properties on recruiting and retaining high-quality staff here in the Mount Washington Valley. It seems we get all the way through the process, finding someone really qualified, really great, really excited to live and work here, and just when we are about to move them forward, final step, board approval, we're notified that they just simply couldn't find a place to live, and therefore we begin the process all over again. And we hear people talk about, let's increase test scores and, what's going on in the community. And there are so many other contributing factors that impact student achievement. Housing and, familial stability, it absolutely is one of those major factors.
We're no strangers to what's happening here. I think any area that's like ours, that's a tourist destination, that's dealing with a housing shortage, it's impacted not just the businesses, but the industry. You can't necessarily close down our area, and we see visitors come through here summer. This is probably one of our busiest summers that we've seen people come through, and for a business to have to say, I'm sorry, we have to limit our hours because of staff shortage, it's a hard hit.
You have key amenities within the community going underserved. Our first responders, our firefighters, our police, our EMTs, they are having a hard time recruiting. They're expanding the response radius where people can live. That ultimately ends up being not as great service for us because it takes longer for people to respond to emergent situations, which could mean lives.
At Huggins Hospital, we have a little over 500 employees. We live in a rural location, so finding housing for our staff can be a challenge. Then the other side of the coin is our patients. In healthcare, we know that about 20% of the work that we do for medical care impacts someone's overall health. But the other 80% of that is the environment, it's their access to food, it's their genetics, their access to housing. If our patients don't have access to housing, then how are they going to focus on their healthcare?
We just did a Carroll County food access study over the past couple of years. And in that study, we were looking at what were the reasons for people's food costs to be high. And you wouldn't think that housing was tied to food costs, but it is.
We have to not look backwards, what things used to be like here. We have to have a forward vision. And the forward vision is what kind of neighborhoods what can we create to be the next wave of neighborhoods based on where we're at today, which is allowing young families to come in, people who are aging out of their homes to come in, baby boomers to have a place to live, and creating that new stock of homes. The problem is that there has to be a way for those homes not to compete with that second homeowner pool. So there has to be something in place that almost separates that pool of homes out from the pool that is available to people who are here purchasing second homes.
What do we need to do? What do we need to change either in land use ordinances? What do we need to consider maybe as financial or tax incentives in order to make what we want a priority and make it something that is viable?
The Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition is a 501c3 nonprofit focused on education and advocacy on the topic of affordable housing in the Mount Washington Valley. Our focus is helping to connect the dots for folks, bringing together the builder with the funding sources, the planner with the voter, helping to create conversations and places for those people to connect. A charrette is a thought experiment where a number of different professionals involved in development, from engineers and architects, town planners, commercial or residential lenders, all come together and create a hypothetical project design on a real piece of property. So it's used as a catalyst for conversation, not necessarily a future actual project.
Based on zoning ordinances today, what's the most density we could build on this lot? And could it even be residential? Then the team goes in and says, wow, 400 acres, as in this case. What could we do here if we sort of put zoning aside, just for this exercise, and what kind of density could we get on this lot using EPA guidelines alone?
There's the zoning side of it. What does the town allow? Could we allow more density? Where are we being too restrictive? Where are we adding on costs to projects that might prohibit housing development to come in, let alone an affordable housing development. There's many restrictions that a town puts on a development to protect the community, but sometimes we don't realize some of the impacts and where those could be mitigated.
The charrette starts with a walkthrough of the property with the design team, followed by, in this case, 2 public listening sessions where the community comes together to voice what they want to see happen on the property. And then the design team comes together for a full day, an intensive 8-hour plus day of design where they go from the ground up, what can fit on the property, what pencils out financially for the project, what is allowable based on current infrastructure, zoning, etc., and what could possibly happen with just some minor changes to any of those things. I think that this charrette is particularly interesting and important because we're doing it on Carroll County owned land. So there is an opportunity here for something to really happen on this piece of property.
Today, Brian is going to give us a little bit of the lay of the land. Brian has a couple of ideas about maybe where we may end up landing. But what's going to end up happening is that the community is going to end up dictating kind of what we do. And what we're going to end up doing is determining whether or not we can do what they want us to do on this property.
It's Carroll County land, it's multiple things. It's Registry of Deeds, Mountain View Community, Annex, the Annex building, and of course the Department of Corrections. And behind us we have a mix of undeveloped and farmland with a road going out to the middle. We're going to have a walk into the site and take a look at the different potential areas of development and maybe which areas are wet, which areas are good candidates for construction, and maybe which ones are good candidate to leave as farming use. Obviously, it's a question of what the community wants and what's going to best fit and how to make it affordable. Desire to develop over here potentially, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then there's the option over here.
I think the big thing as an engineer is you try to identify what those obstacles are early. So we're looking at topography, how steep the land is. We're looking at wetlands, anything that would prohibit us from being able to build on particular portions of the property. After that, it's trying to find the regulations that are appropriate for this parcel and the regulations that we may be able to extend out from to create sort of a more beneficial housing opportunity.
Robert was saying he's concerned that the soils might be too sandy because there is a lot of pines out here, and they usually are attracted to sandy soils.
It's a good exercise, and if you look at zoning in the 13 encatchment towns, many towns have made changes because we've been able to show the community why density is important, and that's the key. It's hard to say to somebody, right now you allow 2 houses on an acre. I'd like you to allow 5 houses on an acre, and people kind of go, I don't know about that. But if you can show people what that looks like and that there can be green space, we've done charrettes where they had a solar farm that not only fed the community, but actually had enough electricity to go out beyond that community and help other homeowners. There's so much that can be done, it's insane. So for me, I just like to stand back and watch the professionals do their work. I'm just in awe every time I see them do this. Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you know if certain charrettes came to fruition? Like, did they?
A charrette is only an exercise to help people understand how zoning may or may not impact the ability to build density on a particular lot. Yes, things have come to fruition in that we have Avesta Housing now in Conway, and we did charrette that land. Now we did the charrette on a different piece of that lot. So again, nothing's built where we did the charrette.
Right.
But the theory, the purpose behind it made a difference. Conway passed laws. The voters voted to change their zoning ordinances. And that allowed Avesta to come in and say, we'd like to invest in your community.
The public input sessions are really important to the design team. A lot of times we'll hear, we don't want to see this, or we really would like to see this, or even some input particular to the property that we didn't see during the site walks.
Some people might not understand how powerful they actually are in this process. We're all going to be living with whatever we develop for many years in the future, hopefully. So it's building that collective picture and understanding what that really looks like.
It's a great turnout. It's nice to see everybody coming out for the charrette.
There's intermittent wetlands throughout. There's a stream that runs through as well.
If we're looking at the project to build housing for everyone that's needing it, that we should look past the typical government regulation that a typical apartment unit has 2 handicap units per 10 other units, because it's just not enough in this county, especially in this county.
I would certainly like to look at the concept of high-rise apartments. They don't have to be 14 stories, but it would accommodate a lot of people without using a lot of the land.
So given that we are in a climate crisis and farmers are at the forefront of dealing with that, I would hope to see energy efficiency and climate smart building, energy efficiency integrated into any planning if there is housing built into that.
As a builder, is this a community job?
When I hear mixed use, I have a different thought for that. We have prime agricultural land that we need to preserve, and it would be nice to get people to come work that land as opposed to us, the government, paying to hay it. We've talked especially about the need to bring families or working professionals to the county. So starter homes are important to us. We'd like to start slow with a project that works. And when you bring in young families, daycare is also a great necessity. So I know we've talked about a mix of some apartments and starter homes, and trying to get developers like Harmony Homes that's done this successful. I do not envision eating up all this land for housing by any means. It needs to be in harmony with our land.
Has there been discussion on how a development like this would put a strain on municipalities like fire, police, added schools?
What's it going to do for our taxes? What's it going to do for our schools? What's it going to do for the workers?
So it's a lot of solutions. Put an ADU in your backyard, that's going to nip off a couple of these rental units right out of the gate. ADUs. Manufactured homes, that's real estate in New Hampshire. Multifamily buildings combined with single-family residences. Look at Evergreen on the Saco. You have high-end homes, and then on the fringes, you have workforce housing and low to moderate income senior housing, and it works. So we just need to be creative as a community. We can do this, you guys.
I mean, all of these listening sessions are complex, right? We all have different ideas of what we could do with land, and sorting that out is a long process. We're lucky to have all these experts in the panel to start figuring that out. But it's important that people share their input, because we all don't know exactly what to do with this property. So we need to understand what the concerns are, what people are excited about, to try and boil it down to something that could be a great project.
Then we get to work. It's an all-day activity with different professionals, from bankers, engineers, architects, planners, to try to come up with a project that in theory could maximize housing opportunities.
So they're taking the real restrictions of the property, the physical restrictions, considering any zoning restrictions, and then creating a design, sometimes overlooking some of the zoning requirements, so that we can later say, listen, the only way that we could build the type of housing that the community said you wanted is by eliminating this zoning, and here's what you would need to change in your zoning ordinances in order to make this development possible. So it's the engineers starting to consider what the site work is going to be, where the property can fit, and then the developers start pricing out what it would take to, how much it would cost to construct that building. Then the bankers start figuring out how they could finance it at those costs. The realtors start figuring out how much they would have to charge for the unit in order to pay for the whole thing. So the whole team has to put their heads together kind of in a sequencing order, and sometimes they have to scrap the whole plan and start over if they find out that it's not affordable after all.
I need somebody to math out the quad,
rentals and how it's a profitable project for somebody if we can, and then we need to know how many other units we have across everything else so we can get the overall construction costs coupled with the overall what we can sale price for,
Exactly.
see what that math is on the front end, and be able to say whether this is
So
feasible,
I need to know,
profitable
so
project.
I would need to know, we would need to know how many singles and how many duplexes for sale we're gonna have. This is that, we're all very idealistic. And so we all want everything. We want to get, hundreds of affordable homes or thousands of affordable homes. But we also have to take into account what the public has communicated to us as to what they want to see. And so taking that information and then applying it to the property, learning what the limitations are with the property as the day progresses. That number we originally had in mind gets shrunk down a little bit because of those limitations. And you've got, I guess maybe the most challenging thing is that you've got these really dynamic people with incredible ideas, really creative, and it's kind of reining it into from creativity to reality. And so as the end of the day approaches, we're now facing that reality. We brought it down to 317.
That's where we started out, was at 317, and then your per unit.
Yeah, that's over 10%.
It's difficult to not only create a development that is affordable, but also there's so much time and effort put into considering what the community has said that they wanted.
We make decisions when we go to the ballot box. We voted for the zoning ordinances that are in place today. So this is a citizen decision. Yes, we voted on it. We felt good about it when we did that. Now we see the ramifications of that. Is that really what we wanted? If the answer is yes, that's what we wanted, we're good. If the answer is, I'd like something a little more sustainable, then that means we have to look at what we can do by law today and what changes could we make to bring about this idea that these building professionals brought to the table.
And so I think ultimately it's up to us as communities to come together, identify what it is that we want, what keeps us, but still helps fix this problem, and present that to our elected officials and tell them this is what we need funding for, this is what we want to see happen, and this is what is going to propel us into the future.
This is great. It's the first time I've done this. It's been interesting and exciting. We got a great group of people here, and we took what I think is a pretty complex, large site with a huge opportunity and coming up with something that's really good. Truth will come out in years to see whether or not it actually gets built, but we think we have every opportunity of creating something that can get built here.
Thank you all for coming out. I recognize some faces from the listening session, so thank you for making the time to come again, or those of you who haven't been with us before, thank you so much for coming to our reveal. This is the Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition's Affordable Housing Charrette.
The design team ultimately came up with a design that included 167 units, utilizing about 60 acres of the available 800 plus acres of county-owned property. Of those 167 units, we had a combination of single-family and duplex-style homes, which would be great starter home opportunities for our community. I think the community was excited initially when they saw the design and the houses that we could put onto the property, but feelings changed when they saw the price tag, understandably. We ended up with homes with a mixture of workforce pricing and market rate pricing, with the workforce homes, the single family style, being about $322,000, which would give monthly cost for that home at, once you factor in insurance and mortgage and potential HOA fees, about $2,700. So that's obviously not going to work for everyone in our community, and I think that there was a lot of disappointment on that number. I think that the important thing to remember is that although we couldn't add apartment style housing or some of the housing that you would need for the lower income earners in our area that really need help with their housing, we were able to provide a design for housing that would help folks in that kind of middle income range, with a household income of about $100,000. they'd be able to afford a home in that development. And if you're looking at a household income of $100,000, that means that you have 2 wage earners making about $50,000 each. So that could be a nurse and an electrician, or a police officer and a teacher. And those are all people that we really need in our community, and people that are struggling right now to find housing. One of the things that we discussed in the Charrette was the fact that although the lower wage earners wouldn't be able to buy homes in this development necessarily, what would happen is if folks who are currently occupying rental units in our area, like the teachers and electricians, are able to buy homes in this development, then that would mean that rentals would become available in that lower price range, and folks could infill into those units. So it has the opportunity to benefit more than just the people who would be able to buy homes in this area. We also discussed the fact that adding 167 homes into the area would have a stabilizing effect on the sale price of other homes. Since these are brand new houses selling for that price, that means that other homes that are currently maybe selling for an inflated rate, that would put downward pressure on those prices. One of the things that came up during the course of the Charrette was the fact that we were not able to put apartment-style housing on this particular piece of property, and that was in part determined by the fact that there's municipal water and sewer does not reach the county land. That was something that I definitely learned in the Charrette, was the cost implications of some of the infrastructure and things that you wouldn't necessarily consider, like Josh McAllister, one of our civil engineers, explained that about a mile of road costs about $2 million to put in. So anywhere that you can avoid having to add infrastructure like roads, it's going to have major cost implications for the project. And also anytime that you have to add infrastructure like water and sewer, that's also going to be a huge determining factor. That's why you typically are able to have affordable housing, apartment style affordable housing, in places where town and water sewer already exist.
What I want to make sure people understand is that we've been in 2 sessions the last 2 days. Quite a few people have come to the activists. When you look up there behind these folks that have worked hard all day, that's what we asked them to do based on the feedback we gave them. Okay, and as a result of that, they came up with these plans. Okay, you can't fault these folks for coming up with a $380,000 house and no septic or sewer system. They did the best they could with that. And having been a civil engineer, I know how this stuff works. The fact is that they gave us the best that they could with the information we gave them.
I see this Charrette as a great success because we didn't necessarily come out thinking we were going to have the project we were going to do. And I think it even exceeded my expectations because I think it has started a bigger conversation about housing and brought people together to discuss it and really dive deep and see how incredibly challenging these problems are.
The Charrette was a success in our eyes because the purpose of a Charrette is just to spark a community conversation. This was always meant as a hypothetical design on a real piece of property that just allows the community to have a visual in order to continue this really important conversation around housing. And the Charrette really pointed out the complexities that go into a development project and why we can't just solve this problem as easily as we would all like. I think that people who came to 1 or 2 or 3 of the nights of our event left feeling differently about the need for affordable housing in our area. This is a conversation that maybe you're not involved in all the time if you own your home. I think it just gave everyone an opportunity to come together and kind of understand what people in our community are facing with this challenge. It also gets us closer to affordable housing solutions by identifying some zoning changes that could happen. We talked about transferable development rights as an opportunity to make changes in a local zoning ordinance. I think one of the things that we identified is potential advocacy opportunities. We had the support of our Lands and Annex Subcommittee, and they had some really great questions at the end of the Charrette because, you know, we saw we weren't able to do the development that we all maybe hoped for. So we had the really great question at the end, well, what does this mean and what do we need to see happen in Concord to maybe make this more of a reality? So I think that there's an opportunity for advocacy advocating for state funding for single-family homes, of which that's currently not something that's available. There's funding for multifamily developments like apartment buildings, but not single-family for sale homes. So those are the kind of things that we're going to be focusing on moving forward is, well, it didn't come in at the price that we would have liked. What can we do to alleviate some of that? The Mount Washington Valley Housing Coalition is going to continue to advocate and educate on the topic of affordable housing in our community, working with our community members, local businesses, politicians, and other stakeholders to try to work on real solutions to the crisis that we're all in.